For most of his life, Adam Savondalas was a quiet man. He lived in upstate New York in a modest apartment with his girlfriend and their dog, Monty. At 26, Adam worked as a freelance software developer. He enjoyed puzzles, black coffee, horror movies, and quiet mornings coding in his home office. He had always been the introspective type, analytical, sometimes moody, but gentle. There was nothing in his day-to-day life that hinted at what was living inside his head. It began subtly. At first, the migraines were rare, once every few weeks, but they were different from any headaches he'd experienced before. They started deep behind his eyes, then spiraled outward like pressure building in his skull. His vision would blur. Lights felt like needles. The pain was searing, like something was pushing outward from inside, trying to get out. Adam chalked it up to stress. Deadlines. Too much screen time. He tried blue light glasses, meditation, even cutting caffeine. Nothing helped. The migraines became more frequent, then daily. Then came the personality shifts. His girlfriend Tessa noticed it first. Adam would forget small things, where he left his keys, what day it was, conversations they'd had just hours before. He grew moody, paranoid. Once she found him standing motionless in the kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at the wall. When she asked what he was doing, he whispered, "I'm listening." But when she pressed further, he had no memory of it the next morning. And then there was the voice. Not another person's voice, his own, but altered. At times it rose into an unnatural pitch, especially when he was agitated. Once during an argument, he shouted something in a voice that made the hair on Tessa's neck stand. It didn't sound like him, she later recalled. It was like someone else was speaking through him. Eventually, Tessa insisted he see a neurologist. The primary care physician sent him for an MRI suspecting a tumor, or perhaps early onset schizophrenia. Nothing could have prepared anyone for what the scans revealed. On the radiologist's screen was a mass. Embedded in the center of Adam's brain, just above the pituitary gland, was a dense, irregular growth. Initially, they feared it was cancer, but as the imaging became clearer, so did the impossible details. Within the mass were calcified bone structures. Then came the unmistakable outlines of molars, perfectly formed human teeth. And there was hair, thick clumps of dark hair embedded in tissue. Adam wasn't growing a tumor, he was carrying a twin. The condition is called fetus in fetu, and it's among the rarest of medical anomalies, occurring only a few dozen times in recorded history. In these cases, one twin absorbs the other in the womb. Normally, the parasitic twin is absorbed harmlessly, but in rare cases, the tissue survives, dormant inside the host's body. It can remain undetected for decades, sometimes forever. Most often it appears in the abdomen, but in Adam's case, his twin had embedded itself in his brain. The mass had its own blood supply. It was alive. Surgery was scheduled immediately. The neurosurgeons prepped for what they thought would be a highly complex tumor removal. What they found was beyond anything they had expected. The mass was a tangled clump of malformed human tissue, soft and rubbery in some areas, calcified and dense in others. There were pieces of what appeared to be a jawbone, molars, cartilage, hair that continued to grow. It had been feeding on Adam's blood supply his entire life, and it was pressing into his pituitary gland, the hormone center of the brain. After the surgery, Adam was moved to intensive care. Recovery was slow but physically successful. The mass was removed completely. The surgical team called it a once-in-a-career case, a marvel, a win. But Adam didn't feel like he'd won. That's when the psychological effects began to deepen. Doctors discovered that the parasitic twin had been interfering with his endocrine system for years. His hormone levels were wildly abnormal. His testosterone had plummeted. His estrogen and prolactin were elevated. Over the past few years, his body had subtly changed. Softened features, mild gynecomastia, shifts in emotional behavior. The twin, they theorized, had likely been female. And her tissue had been altering his body chemistry all along. Adam felt betrayed by his own biology. In therapy, he began reporting dreams, strange ones. In one recurring dream, he was inside a dark room with a crib. The crib rocked on its own and a faint sobbing echoed in the distance. In another, he stood in front of a mirror that didn't reflect him. Instead, it showed a different person, a young girl who mimicked his movements but mouthed different words. He began to question his identity. Who had he been all these years? Had his thoughts always been his own? Had something else lived beside his consciousness? And when that thing was removed, what part of him had died with it? His relationship with Tessa deteriorated. She tried to support him through the recovery, but Adam became withdrawn. He would stare at mirrors for long stretches. He hated being touched. He once told her, "I feel like I'm haunted, but not by a ghost, by a version of myself that never existed." She moved out 6 months later. The case was eventually published in the Journal of Neurosurgery and circulated through medical forums as a sensational oddity. The story made headlines for a few days. Man has twin removed from his brain. Then the media moved on. But Adam couldn't move on. He deleted his social media, stopped answering messages, left his apartment, his job, his therapist. Friends said he moved to another state and lives under a different name. No one hears much from him anymore. But occasionally his old colleagues receive cryptic emails, rambling, disjointed notes written in third person, as if someone else is speaking about Adam, not as him. One read, "She's quieter now, but I still feel her watching me when I sleep." No one is sure what became of Adam, but some who knew him claim he's not the same, that he walks differently, that he talks in dual tones, one soft, one sharp, that sometimes in crowded places he whispers to someone who's not there. One person said they saw him standing by a lake at sunset, unmoving for hours. When they finally approached him and asked if he was okay, he turned slowly and said something they'll never forget. "She used to share my mind. Now she shares my silence."